It is state championship week in South Dakota, and that means it is the season finale of Football Insiders. David Brown, yes, shed a tear, multiple tears. David Brown, Jason Andera, this has been awesome all year long. We're going to break down all 7 championships. And speaking of breaking down, if you hear some weird noises, construction going on outside the studio. So just an FYI, if you hear anything beyond just Jandy and I's normal banter, which may sound like construction to some people anyway. So,
well, hopefully it's constructive, and we can give you guys an edge on your picks on how you're going to do in these 7 championship games. I had a chance to visit with several coaches, not only playing in these games, but the actual coaches playing against these teams who could really dig deep and find some things to watch in this, so we're happy to pass that along to you guys today.
Yeah, if you haven't read your blog with the anonymous coaches breaking down all 7 championship games, we are not anonymous, but we will still break it down.
We will.
We're going to go in order of the championship, so we were going to start in 9-man. 9B, it is number 2 Falton area versus number 1 Avon. And very quickly, just before we get into all this, our picks. I am 2 games ahead of you through both the quarterfinals and the semifinals. I am 31-9. You are 29-11. You are 2 games back. We do not know each other's picks for these 7 games, so I hope we have 2 differences so you have a chance.
I might let you pick first.
Okay. There we go. You might let me pick first. That's only fair.
I do need to close some ground. No, I've got my 7 that I actually think are going to win, and you've got yours, so we'll just let it play out.
Alrighty. 9B. Number 2 Falton, number 1 Avon. Falton 10-1, Avon 9-2. Falton defeated Potter County 42-0 in the semifinals. Avon defeated DeSmet 46-19 in the semifinals. Their last matchup, we mentioned it on Varsity Sports Live last week, was the first round in 9B last year. Just your average 74-48 final in favor of Avon.
I hope we have that many points scored on Thursday. I don't
122 combined points.
Don't think we probably will, but there's not a lot of similarities between that game last year and what these teams bring this year, mainly because Avon brings Isaiah Meyer. He did not play a lot last year. This year has been a star, and he's had a few small injuries early in the year, and he's really gotten better as the year has gone on. So he is the big X factor. Remember, Avon's the 1 seed here.
Just by being 2 losses.
We always kind of forget, like, they played a tough enough schedule to get enough power points to be the top seeded team here. So a lot of people kind of just thinking they're here, they're just glad to get here. They're here to win this thing.
Yeah, you mentioned Isaiah Meyer has, over the course of the season, really established himself. Obviously, you mentioned the injuries early, but it's one of those players who's peaking at the right time. And I will admit, I thought about this, but I think we both picked DeSmet last week.
Yes, we did.
Avon, a 46-19 victory for the Pirates. So obviously the Pirates, they showed us. But I think that maybe goes to show you that at the beginning of the playoffs, when we saw Avon was the number 1 seed based on seed points, we were kind of a little curious. We saw the tough schedule, but we didn't necessarily know how that would translate. It certainly did translate.
Well, they just continued to improve. Last week, DeSmet, their quarterback went out early in that game. That didn't help matters, but Avon still took it to them. They won that game because they were very sound in what they do. They rode momentum. They stayed high on that momentum throughout the game. And that's something they're going to have to watch in this game. That a couple coaches told me that they're a team that does ride momentum high and low, so they're going to have to stay as high as possible if they want to compete with this very solid Trojans team.
Yeah, so let's take a look at Falton area. What's interesting about them is we mentioned the tough strength of schedule for Avon. Falton has faced double-digit seeds in every round of the playoffs. So they started out with number 15 Jones County, then they got number 10 Kadoka area, and then they got the upset-minded Potter County, the 11 seed last week. So they faced double-digit seeds in each round. So
good point.
You would think lower competition, but they also shut them out. They haven't given up a point in the playoffs yet.
Exactly. You don't have any control of who you're going to play, but you're right. They have played a weaker schedule to get to the Dome. But throughout the season, they played teams like Warner, and they played some very tough competition throughout the year. Beat Hitchcock-Tulare soundly. They had some very good wins this year. So I think this is a very balanced team. Their seniors have played a huge role. Their underclassmen have done a great job in their supporting roles, even though the senior class is really what they lean on.
Yeah, obviously quarterback Lane Cotton is just a dynamic athlete who can do it all. One interesting thing when you look at their records, Falton being 10-1, Avon being 9-2, all three of their combined losses were to teams in classes above them. They're both undefeated against 9B competition. And so I looked at this matchup pretty intensely. When I looked at it and just looked at some of the other factors in terms of defense specifically, Avon has given up at least 12 points and 2 touchdowns in every single game this season, while Falton only gives up an average of 6 points per game. And so when it came to that back and forth, despite Avon peaking right now, I'm officially picking Falton in this game.
You know, Avon is going to give some problems to Falton with the option game that they have with Isaiah Meyer and the power that they run both inside and out. But Falton has a better overall team. I think when you get to the Dome, too, having a little bit more balance helps. And this Falton area team does have more balance. They can throw the ball. Spencer Melius is a guy I think who could really rise up and play a big role in this game for Falton. We all know Garrett Kramer and Lane Cotton are going to be big parts of this game, but I think they're going to get some really surprise play from some of these underclassmen that they're not usually focused on. So I have Falton area as well.
Yeah, I think that defense for Falton will be tested, but Avon just needs someone besides Meyer to step up. They're going to need, Birma to have a good game at quarterback. They're going to need guys like, Thury and Butter to do some stuff on offense. It can't just all be Meyer. And just looking at the entirety of the defense, I just think Falton has the better team overall.
It's going to be closer than some people think,
right.
But I think Falton is and has been the best team all season long.
All right, so we are both taking Falton in 9B. The 9A championship, number 7 Dubrook area, who's 8-3, against number 1 and undefeated Warner at 11-0. Dubrook, in the past 2 rounds, has beaten previously undefeated teams. They topped Alcester Hudson in the quarterfinals and Phillip in the semifinals in very close games. Meanwhile, Warner defeated Canastota 37-16 in their semifinal to get here. This is one of the more intriguing games just because you have this Warner team that's been pretty dominant in 9A all season long. And then this Dubrook team, which had moments early, kind of petered off toward the end of the regular season and has been a completely different team in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you're exactly right. This Warner team got down early a little bit last week against Canastota, found a way to come back. That's the first time they've been tested in a while. And just like you said, this Dubrook team has surprised, I think, almost everybody. I talked to 9A coaches throughout the state, and they said, hey, I thought this team maybe should have been ranked at some point this year. And I did give them a few votes throughout the year, but this has been a total surprise to almost everybody. We know that Gavin Landmark can run the football. We know that Jace Vomaka is a playmaker at quarterback. Do they have enough guys to make a team effort? Well, they have the last 2 weeks. They've been very, very solid in every aspect of the game.
Yeah, I looked at their schedule. Until the playoffs, Dubrook had no wins against teams above 500 or teams that finished above 500. They had a couple shutouts this season, but they were against teams that went 0-8 during the regular season. And they lost their last 2 to end the regular season. So Dubrook went into the playoffs sputtering. And somehow, some way, they've turned it around. So the 14-10 win against Alcester Hudson in the quarters, 18-14 against Phillip in the semifinals. That defense, we talked about their offense early in the season, but that defense has been able to control things.
They're very good on defense, and they've faced, I think, one of the more high-powered 9-man offenses in all of 9-man football in Phillip last week, and did a very good job of containing some high-powered guys in the backfield. So they're going to need to do that against Hunter Kramer because individually he's one of the top players in all of 9-man football. And that's a whole different animal to me. A guy who's used to playing in the Dome, has been to the Dome 2 of the last 3 seasons as a quarterback for this Warner Monarch team. That presents some different problems that the Dolphins haven't had to run into yet.
Yeah, let's look at Warner. Undefeated this season. They won at Hamlin, a class above them early in the season. But I looked at their schedule. Against 9A opponents, they have at least 35 points in every single game. So that Dubrook defense is certainly going to be tested. And as you said, Kramer's just an all-world athlete, whether he's playing quarterback, running back, receiver, whatever he's playing.
And Josiah Baum's done a good job running the ball to offset that. They've got playmakers on the outside. We saw last week, they came up with some great plays in the passing game where Hunter Kramer's good, but he's not going to light it up passing the football, but he keeps you honest with his arm.
So Dubrook, this is only their second Dakota Dome appearance ever. They won the 2012 9AA championship against Howard back again in 2012. And Warner, meanwhile, they've been, as you jokingly call them, the Buffalo Bills of the Dakota Dome, because they are 0-4 in state championship games, including losses 2 of the last 3 years, including last year against Gregory, 36-23. I was very tempted to take Dubrook just because I think that defense has reached another level these playoffs. But trying to beat 3 undefeated teams in a row is really difficult. I also looked at the fact the Alcester-Hudson game was kind of in bad weather. The Phillip game, it wasn't necessarily in bad weather, but maybe like suboptimal compared to the rest of the state. I think inside with a Warner team that's just been scoring at will against 9A opponents, I was tempted, but I am going to take Warner.
Dubrook is used to being doubted. I know that, and I've doubted them the last couple of weeks. So why not just continue doubting them? It's not just that I'm doubting them. It's just that this Warner team is that good. They are very, very solid. We talked about Baum and Delaney and Fishback, and Alex Pudwell came up with a huge interception. He's so opportunistic in the defensive backfield. But overall, it's Hunter Kramer that's the difference in this game. And I just don't think Dubrook has a Hunter Kramer. Give me the Warner Monarchs.
Yeah, Warner, by our estimation, will win their first ever state championship. 9AA. It's the Thursday night game at 7 p.m. Number 3, Howard. Number 1, Parkson. Howard with 1 loss on the season. Parkson is undefeated. Howard went on the road last week, shut out number 2, Platte Geddes in the semifinals. That was very impressive, 36-0. And then Parkson defeated Hamlin 26-3, and very disappointing for Parkson because they gave up 3 points.
Yeah, it raised that average from 2 points a game to 2.1 points per game.
They're so disappointed.
Given up. And obviously the defense has been outstanding this year for Parkson, and that's what keeps them in every single game. But offensively, probably don't get enough credit for what they can do now that Coulter Kramer's running the ball, at top level. He's played, missed 2 or 3 games earlier this year.
In the middle of the season.
Yep, but with him and Jervik and Borman, nobody has a combination like that can just run the ball down your throat. So offensively, they've been doing it as well, controlling the game, but it's the defense that's been winning, hopefully for them, championships.
And it was the defense that propelled them in their last matchup. They met in the quarterfinals last year, and Parkson went on the road and won 34-7. This was Howard back in 2022. It was Howard's first year returning to the 9AA ranks, undefeated in the regular season, kind of shockingly lost to Parkson in that quarterfinal round. So this is the rematch that Howard probably wanted to see. Well, I don't know if wanted, but they want another shot. I don't know if they necessarily were just like, we want to face.
Yeah, they're not picking one team, but they all these guys remember, especially 1 year later, they remember that game vividly. These teams really mirror each other. Mm-hmm. They play very similar games. They both have 3 to 4 running options that they have in the backfield. They run the same type of offense. That reminds me, and I also got a comment from one of the coaches on this, how Hansen mirrors Parkson and plays them very closely because of that. I think Howard has just been getting better and better throughout the season, and they have really peaked here in these last couple of weeks. Their win over Platte Geddes, I know a lot of people maybe expected them to go on the road and win like we did, but the way they did it,
by shutout, that was impressive.
That really changed my opinion on how this game might play out.
And you talk about the Parkson offense averaging nearly 44 points a game. Howard averages 40 points a game. You see Caden Hoyer being able to be a dual threat quarterback. You've seen their stable running backs, whether it's Remmers or Feldhaus or Kepsel. Some of these upperclassmen for Howard, they really have a bunch of dynamic weapons. But again, so does Parkson. You mentioned with Coulter Kramer being back, I think that elevates their performance a little bit more. Borman's been excellent. Braden Jervik has been excellent, specifically in this postseason. And then overall, just the fact that Parkson has given up 23 points this entire season, 8 shutouts in 11 games. That's
really good.
It's insanity.
It's really good, and I've seen really good defenses get to that championship game and really turn out the lights. But then I've also seen them play the best team that they've played all season, and things even out a little bit more. I'm going to make my pick first on this one. I'm going to take the Howard Tigers. I think that this is a team that, at the beginning of the year, everybody was on as the number 1 team. I think it took them a while to work in, the couple of Remmers kids, the Jackson Remmers and Weston Remmers, and figure out Tate and Hoyer how to work with them and balance it out between Carson Feldhaus and Tate Miller. And they have done that. And I think that they've reached a level now where they can play the toughest game of their year, but match up with Parkson.
So you're taking Howard.
I'm going to go with the Tigers.
Okay, I just looked at the 8 shutouts in 11 games. I don't think Parkson is going to shut Howard out, but I do think Parkson is going to win this game. I just think if they get an early lead, that defense is going to be able to lock the Tigers down. To me, it's all about how Parkson starts this game. Now, if they start getting into a little bit of a back and forth, I might be a little more concerned. But I just look at that defense and just the
really
23 total points all season long, including the playoffs. They have 4 wins against above 500 teams, does Parkson, so it's not like they're playing, also-rans or really bad teams.
Right.
I just think the combination of everything, and with Kramer being back, I just like Parkson in this one.
Yeah, it's tough to argue that, but that at least we have one difference.
Yes.
That's all I got to say.
All right, we have the difference. In 9AA, I got Parkson, and you have Howard. Moving to 11-man, the 11B championship. It's the early game on Friday morning at 10 a.m. Number 6 Hot Springs, who is 10-1, against number 4 and defending state champions Elk Point Jefferson, also 10-1. This is the only championship without a number 1 seed, Jim.
Yeah, and it's what, the 4 and 6 seeds?
The 4 and 6 seeds. That what a weird combo.
Yeah, not like we're not going to have the 2 and the 4 or something like that. We got the 4 and the 6, but both teams, and all season long, we've talked to 11B coaches on Football Insiders all year, and we heard so many coaches say there's 6 to 7 to 8 to 10 teams that feel like they could compete at the Dome, and these two teams have played their butts off in the last couple of weeks and really deserve this opportunity to win a championship.
Yeah, for Hot Springs, they defeated number 10 Rapid City Christian, who is also an upset-minded team. They topped them 28-10 in the semifinals. Meanwhile, Elk Point Jefferson in the championship rematch went on the road and won at Winter 21-16. We mentioned how last year they ended Winter's overall winning streak at like 30-plus games. They ended their home winning streak, which you said was what, 36?
36 games, yeah.
That is incredibly impressive from the Huskies, 2 years in a row to defeat Winter and end such long streaks.
Give a lot of credit to Jake Terry. I mean, obviously the players are out there doing it, but what a change we've seen in Elk Point Jefferson over the last couple of years. They've really become a program now where every year they are going to be competitors. And this, coming into the year, didn't look like maybe one of their championship squads. They looked solid, but the coaching job that they've gotten throughout the year with Jake Terry and the execution that they've gotten from some of those top players, unbelievable.
And obviously the schedule is very fickle. It just kind of depends on who you play, when you play, how you play them. But among every team at all 7 championships, Elk Point Jefferson has the most wins against above 500 teams.
Yeah.
Of their 11 total games, they have 6 wins against above 500 teams. That has to say something not only, as you said, about the team, but just about rising up to that level of competition.
They are not scared, that's for sure. And we saw it last year, being the new kids on the block, going to the Dome, playing against Winter, a team that's been at the Dome several years in a row. And they weren't scared. They did not back down. They did a great job, and I think they're coming in with the same mentality. Like, this is our home field. It's only a few miles away. We're gonna have a great crowd. They're ready to go.
And what's interesting is that both these teams are relatively inexperienced at the Dome. You mentioned Elk Point Jefferson. Their only trip to the Dome was last year when they won the state championship against Winter. Hot Springs, meanwhile, their first Dome appearance in 20 years. 2003 is their only other state championship appearance. They were in 11A and they lost to West Central. So a combined 2 games of state championship experience between these two teams. You got these lower seeds. I think this is one of the most fascinating championship games we can have.
It is. When we break it down, again, go to my blog. You can find a lot of analysis. The 11B coaches were very active in trying to share information, and a lot of it was the same type of information. EPJ does a great job of disguising what they're running. They run a lot of shifts. That's going to be hard for Hot Springs to react to. And Hot Springs, on the other hand, you've got number 1, number 2, and number 3. 3 of the toughest runners.
Majeski, Peterson, and Iverson.
They are unbelievably hard to stop, and they are so physical. I think the common opponent here that I look at was Sioux Valley, where Sioux Valley beat Elk Point Jefferson, but had a tough time doing it, and that was, a month and a half ago? And then Hot Springs coming in to Volga and really handing it to them last week. You can't compare scores in this one, but listening to Dan Hughes, he said this game's going to be super close. These are 2 very well-coached teams that will react well to each other and are both ready for that big moment.
Hot Springs averaging 42 points a game, only giving up 7.5. Elk Point Jefferson averaging 35, giving up 9.5 per game. Do you want me to make my pick first?
You can go first.
Okay, so EPJ has the most wins against above 500 teams this season. They probably have the most impressive win of the season at Winter. And I know we can't always necessarily look at scores against other teams, but I just think Hot Springs is on a roll. I've also picked against Hot Springs the last 2 rounds. I'm not making the same mistake. I'm going to take Hot Springs for a couple of reasons. The Sioux Valley game, which you mentioned, EPJ lost to them 20-11 early in the season when teams were trying to figure things out. Sioux Valley was undefeated, had figured their team out, and Hot Springs just came into Volga and absolutely blasted them 49-13. They also have 2 other common opponents this season, Bridgewater, Emory, Ethan. EPJ won by 29, Hot Springs, they won by 48. McCook Central Montrose, EPJ won by 28, Hot Springs won by 41. So in the common opponents, Hot Springs has been better than EPJ. Again, does that mean anything? Not necessarily, but I think the Sioux Valley one to me means something. And I think Hot Springs has all season long been a team that has been consistently underrated in terms of poll numbers, and I'm just not going to do it again. I'm taking Hot Springs.
And I've been high on Hot Springs all season long, and really that Del Rapids game kind of woke me up to...
That was Del Rapids' hardest competition all year.
For sure, and they have done nothing to let me down. But this Elk Point Jefferson team, it's going to feel kind of weird, picking Elk Point Jefferson, because I've always been against them, and I think they use that for motivation.
That's right.
So I feel bad.
Well, they did last year for sure.
And this is literally a coin flip game for me. I think these 2 teams... You can take the common scores and kind of take that out because these teams know how to keep games close. And for me, I think Hot Springs comes in here with the best athletes. And those best athletes, when they get to a big moment like this, I think they're the type of guys that are going to shine. Give me Hot Springs in this one in an extremely close game.
So we both have Hot Springs in 11B. 11A. A rematch of 2022. Number 2 West Central, number 1 Del Rapids. West Central 10-1, Del Rapids undefeated at 11-0. West Central defeated number 6 Lennox 57-22 in their semifinal. Del Rapids, maybe a bit of a closer game than people thought against number 4 Sioux Falls Christian, but they win that one 22-14. And again, these teams did not play in the regular season, so their last matchup was last year's state championship.
And last year's state championship, if you remember, the bus ride for West Central took a little
right.
longer than they thought to get there.
Detour.
So they felt a little just off schedule in the entire beginning of that game, and it was just kind of a weird game the way everything played out right after the beginning. But it ended up being a fairly close game, and you had 2 very similar teams that just love to run the football, and this time we've got the same thing. 2 teams that love to run the football. Between the 2 teams, 568 yards of offense generated on the ground.
That's a lot.
We're good. So I don't think we're going to have that many yards. But they also threw the ball a little bit more than people expected last year when they came to the actual championship game. So just look for that, I guess.
Yeah, you have Jack Henry on one side for Del Rapids and Caden Alston on the other side for West Central. And what's funny is we'd all joked all season long about how little Jack Henry had thrown it, but him and Alston kind of have similar stats this season.
Has even fewer attempts this year. And both are great baseball players, by the way. Alston, a fantastic catcher, and Jack Henry, a fantastic pitcher and shortstop for Del Rapids. Anyway, that's just a side note. But those 2 would love to throw the ball more. They both know how to throw the ball, but the offenses are designed to run the football.
And these are 2 very experienced teams in this Dakota Dome. West Central 12-4 all-time in state championship games. Of course, they had that great run in the late 90s, early 2000s. Del Rapids, they're 6-2 in championship games and obviously won it all a season ago. Both these teams excellent against above 500 teams. West Central 4-1 this season, Del Rapids 4-0. And I looked, and I think the conventional wisdom was Del Rapids. I think just their toughest test, as we mentioned, was a team a class below them in Hot Springs, but that was a game they nearly lost.
Interestingly enough, both these teams' toughest tests came from a
class
below
that's
them.
Right. That's right.
West Central got, shut down by this winter team
at home.
So, hey, the top teams in 11B, they are very good. But when it comes to these 2 teams, very similar. Several running backs, but you got Mason Stubbe and you got Jack Henry. Some elite athletes on Del Rapids. I just don't think West Central has those type of offensive weapons. Defensively, they do, in Crew Hire and Chet Sarda. Those guys are amazing. So those 2 guys are going to have to step up big time defensively to stop Henry and Stubbe. I just like Del Rapids in this one. I like their athletes on offense a little bit more than I do West Central.
Yeah, and add Cole Roosing to that mix for Del Rapids. He's really played well down the stretch. But yeah, the 28-0 loss by West Central to Winter Since that game, their offense has averaged more than 50 points per contest. For the season, they averaged 35, but since the loss to Winter, they've averaged a little more than 50. Now, it's only been 4 games, a couple games to end the regular season, couple games in the playoffs. And you mentioned the weaponry. You mentioned, Higher and, the running backs like Jesse Jose and Jarding. And, you can add Sarda to that mix as well.
Even Aiden Bartman, the juniors.
Yeah, Bartman as well. I just think the Trojan offense kind of had, a come-together type of meeting after that 28-0 loss. I think they've really played well down the stretch. They've played well in the postseason. They seem to be a team locked in, and I don't think they're going to have any bus issues. Fingers crossed this time. So I am taking West Central over Del Rapids. I think their offense has figured things out. I think they were humbled in a lot of ways after losing to Winter, and so I'm going to take the Trojans to win the rematch.
If there's a team that can play with them, it's a team like West Central that plays their style. And you look what Sioux Falls Christian did last week and just didn't let Mason Stubbe make a big play. They had enough athletes to do that. West Central has enough athletes to do that as well. I just think when all things are equal, I got to go with the Warriors. So I think it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the Sioux Falls Christian game. I don't think Sioux Falls Christian, quote unquote, figured Dells out, but I do think West Central is going to look at that tape very, very closely this week and see what did Sioux Falls Christian do to
make
put
sure
themselves,
Stubbe doesn't make a big play.
Yeah, put themselves in a position to attempt to slow things down. I don't think Dells is going to get slowed down at all in this game. But I just like the weaponry that West Central has, and I think their offense has been a little better lately. So
all right, we got a couple different.
We got a couple differences. You have a chance. You have a chance. You got Del Rapids. I got West Central. 11 AA. It's a late game on Friday at 7. Number 2 Yankton, who is 10-1, versus number 1 Pierre, who is 11-0. Of course, Yankton's only loss of the season was to Pierre in the regular season, and the Govs are going for an insane 7th straight 11 AA championship.
Unbelievable what Pierre has been able to do, and yes, they've had great athletes over that time, but the common denominator is Steve Steele and the job that his staff has done, putting kids in the right position, preparing them. And for them to win 7 in a row, it's almost unbelievable in this day and age to be able to have that kind of consistency at the high school level. But shout out to Pierre for even having a chance to do that this week. Unreal. They defeated Watertown 35-14, in the semifinals. Yankton had a tough game with T-Area, but they were mainly in control of that one. 33-25 ended up being the final. And so all season long we thought, are we going to get the Pierre versus T rematch? We almost did, but Yankton kind of late September, early October, especially after their regular season game against Pierre, really established themselves as the second best team in 11 AA. And now they're healthy again. That's the big thing. I think they're much healthier. I think you can't key on one receiver. They've got 4 guys out there who can make plays. You can't now key on Evan Zirk anymore with Shaler Platt back in the backfield. And then Lucas Kamshoff, one of the more dynamic players in the entire state as far as running and passing the football. I really like what they do on defense too. They are ball hawks. They can change games by taking the ball away through the interception. They're very good at picking passes off, and if they get Pierre into a situation where they have to pass, don't be surprised if Yankton comes up with 1 or 2 big interceptions in this game. Yeah, Tucker Gilmore's a fantastic two-way player for the Bucs, also great as a receiver. Austin Goebel at receiver, so the weaponry for Lucas Kamshoff is back. And then for Pierre, you got Cade Kaiser taking over for Lincoln Kienholz. He's not the same athlete that Kienholz is, but Kaiser has done an excellent job this season. Jet Zabel, of course, whether you want to call him a tight end receiver, whatever you want to call him, he's fantastic. And then the running game. I think that in the past, it wasn't that Trey Lewis and Brock Mosier weren't putting up numbers, but I think this is a more balanced Pierre offense than we've had in the past, just because of Kienholz's running and passing ability. Yeah, they haven't had a great running game because they haven't had to the last couple of years, and a lot of times their quarterback is their leading runner. I mean, you look back at what Stout did a couple of years ago. He was one of their best runners. Yep. Kaiser's one of their best runners, but the shot in the arm they got this year with Mosier and Trey Lewis putting up very even stats, and Lewis, kind of coming in later in the year and having a couple of really big games to help them out. I think it's made Pierre a really scary team to defend. Yankton is 8-5 all-time in state championship games. In fact, their last appearance in the Dakota Dome was 2015 when they beat Pierre to win the state championship. The Govs are 7-2 in state championship games. They won it all in 2013, and of course they've won it all each of the past 6 seasons. I think the return of Shaler Platt will help Yankton. I just think, as we talked about with the running game of Mosier and Lewis, I think the Governors are a little more multifaceted than they've been in years past. And amazingly enough, I'm taking Pierre to win its 7th straight
11A AA title.
Amazingly enough, no, I think that's the consensus right now. I would not be shocked, and I was very close to picking Yankton in this game, just because the first time they played, Yankton kind of had control of this game.
They were leading in the second half of that game.
Early in the game, and they kept that throughout, and I just feel like they figured a few things out that Pierre does, but in the end, you get into the fourth quarter, I want Steve Steele on my sideline making the calls, and nothing against Brady Muth. They have done a fantastic job, but I just feel like that magic is going to happen again. And Jet Zabel, to me, is the best player in this class.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of whether he's running the football, he's thrown it a couple times this year, or catching almost 20 touchdowns on the year. So I like Pierre too, even though this game is going to be. I really think this is going to come down to a fourth quarter game.
Yeah, I think it will be close, but I do ultimately think in the end, Pierre and that championship experience will certainly help them. So we both have the Govs in 11AA. And finally, the big showdown in AAA on Saturday night. Number 3, OGorman, 9-2 on the season, versus number 1 and undefeated Sioux Falls Lincoln at 11-0. OGorman went on the road and beat number 2 Harrisburg 49-34 in the semifinals, getting revenge for the end of the regular season loss that they had to the Tigers. Meanwhile, Lincoln survived its toughest test of the season by far, 28-21 over Brandon Valley at Howard Wood Field. That was a very interesting semifinal for Lincoln, and I was on the call for that game, and you kind of heard it afterwards. They weren't underestimating Brandon Valley by any stretch of the imagination, but Brandon Valley played a really good game against them.
They played a really good game, and if Brandon doesn't make a few mistakes early on, it's even
a couple early turnovers.
It's even closer. We said earlier this year, the only way Lincoln can lose is if they beat themselves. Well, they almost got beat, and we also said if you take any single player out of Lincoln's team, they're still going to find a way to make it happen. But I'll tell you what, they need to find a way to run the ball a little bit more consistently when they get a 2 or 3 score lead. And that's one thing that we didn't see last week. And Brandon Valley had that quick strike play ability with Landon Delaney. Well, this OGorman team has that same quick strike play ability with some really good weapons on the outside. And the last time these two teams played, it was a 3-point game at halftime. And I think the OGorman second half was down a little bit because they weren't as conditioned to play 4 quarters of football, just because they haven't had to as much those last couple of weeks. They are more conditioned now. These guys are playing some of their best ball in the fourth quarter. OGorman won that game in the fourth quarter last week against Harrisburg. I don't think we're going to use that as an excuse anymore. This is going to be a very good game in the fourth quarter. They're going to leave it all on the field.
One of the things that was interesting to me about that Brandon Valley Lincoln game is you could tell that Brandon Valley did not want Jack Smith to beat them. They let Isaac Jarofsky get a couple of touchdowns. And I say let, not disparagingly.
Right.
Isaac Jarofsky is a fantastic player. He's going to play in the NSIC next year at USF. But Jack Smith is the name that everyone knows. He's going to SCSU next season. And they moved him around. Lincoln did its normal thing, but Schaefer went to his other weapons because I think Brandon did not want Jack Smith to beat them.
Yeah.
And they kept it close. They held Lincoln to 28 points, the lowest of the season. And it's just an interesting dynamic, as you said. Without those turnovers, Brandon Valley could have had a legitimate shot to win that game. I think Lincoln, in the weirdest way, it was exactly what they needed. They didn't need another game where they cruise to victory and maybe let their guard down. I think this is probably the best wake-up call they could have received.
I think so too, because, as much as they try to stay humble and as much as they try to stay, aware of what all these other teams could do to them, a game like that gives you a new perspective. As a Lincoln player, you're like, ooh, this is real. And I don't think that's going to damage their confidence at all. I do think it will, exactly what you said, give them that one shot in the arm that they need to make this happen. I love what some of these coaches told me. Against a team like Lincoln, mistakes get amplified, turnovers, missed tackles, and you add a championship feel to that and a few mistakes for OGorman, and this thing could unravel very quickly for OGorman. That being said, I am not going to be shocked if this game is close in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, Lincoln's first 2 touchdowns against Brandon Valley were the direct result of turnovers. There was a fumble that Lincoln recovered in their own red zone and then in Brandon Valley's red zone as well. And so they built that quick 14-0 lead because of some mistakes by the Lynx. And with OGorman, you mentioned the two-way players aren't really much of an excuse anymore, and that's part of the reason I picked them last week is just because I think in terms of the best players, Maverick Jones and Ryland Satter and Henry Theobald. I just liked their best players versus Harrisburg's best players.
Yeah.
This week, it's not necessarily more even, but you have more dynamic athletes on the other side. You're going to have, Hayden Gruce against Tate Schaefer. You're going to have Jack Smith against Ryland Satter and Henry Theobald. You're going to have Maverick Jones against Draven Hodge. You're going to have dynamic athletes at multiple offensive positions on both sides.
For sure. This is littered with college football players in this game. Like even Noah Vandell, the play that he made last week for OGorman for the pick six, they're going to need a play or two like that. And early in the year, I said, well, that wouldn't be possible because Lincoln is so tight with the football. They've turned it over a little bit more here in the last few weeks than they have in the entire first half of the season. So OGorman's going to need some big plays somehow outside their big 4 or 5 studs that they have on their team. They're all-state type players. They're going to need a Noah Vandell. They're going to need a Josh Wolfold, somebody to come up and step up and make a huge play for them in order to make this game competitive. But I still think Lincoln, too many positives in their favor to pick against them. I still have the Patriots.
So I looked at this, and again, I considered OGorman. I really did. I think that OGorman has the athletes to make this a competitive game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any stretch. I think it's going to be similar to the first half that we saw in the regular season a little bit earlier this year. But I think Tate Schaefer and Jack Smith will get it right in this game. I think they're going to find a way to spread things out. I think the running game, that's going to be the big question for me. If, as you said earlier, if Lincoln can get something established, because, Draven Hodge has looked a little banged up in recent weeks. They've used Ralph Williams. They've used Josh Myers. If they can get some semblance of a running game going, and that can open things up for Schaefer in the passing game, I think that will help Lincoln tremendously. And even if it doesn't, I think Schaefer has been waiting for this moment for a while. He said after the game, I was tired of losing the semifinals. I was here as a freshman when we lost, as a sophomore, as a junior. He's got this one and final opportunity in the Dakota Dome. I think they take advantage in a close game. I'm taking Lincoln as well.
And these leaders on this team, they're not going to get freaked out. I know Dawson Syme, I know Tate Schaefer, I know Jack Smith. They are level-headed, and they're going to find a way to get their team on board. And really, for me, again, we went this whole segment without even talking about how great the offensive line is for Lincoln.
For both sides,
and I think, especially for Lincoln, this Lincoln offensive line, I think will take over late in the game, and that's going to be the difference for me, and give me the Patriots.
And so if Lincoln wins, by the way, we will have our 5th different champion in the last 5 years in 11 AAA.
Crazy.
Which is, a division with only 9 schools in it. But you had OGorman in 2019, you had Brandon Valley in 2020, Harrisburg in 2021, and Jefferson last season. So again, if Lincoln wins,
Crazy.
5th different champion in the last 5 years. And if OGorman wins, it's 4th different champion in 4 years. The ebbs and flows of AAA, it just kind of depends on who you get when they're really young and how you develop them.
That bodes well for Roosevelt and Washington out there for next year, so who knows?
Absolutely. But, all right, we have exactly 2 differences.
We only had 2. So
but
best I can do is tie.
The best you can do is tie, but still, again, so our differences are you have Howard over Parkson, and then the other one is you have Del Rapids over West Central, and I have the other side in both those.
And I think you could honestly, and I'm not just saying this, you could honestly make a case for every team, all 14 of these teams, to find a way to win. I really believe that. That being said, there's always 1 or 2 games that just get out of hand, but I think we're in for maybe 5 really good games here out of the 7.
And it all starts tomorrow, 10 a.m. with the 9B championship. Quick side note, thank you for having me on Football Insiders this year. This has been a ton of fun.
And you know what? It's been fun to be able to provide this content for you guys out there. If you enjoy it, smash that like button. And
look at you sounding like a social media mogul. Smash the like button.
Smash the like button so that we can keep doing this in the future.
Hashtag Football Insiders. But thank you again. This is our season finale. Enjoy the state championship games, everyone.
Don't forget, we have Varsity Sports Live Friday, and then we have Player of the Year the following week.
That's right.
So make sure to stay with us for a couple more weeks.
Yep, we'll be live on Friday night at 10:30. We'll have recaps of the first 6 state championship games, and all the championship games in North Dakota will also be final on Friday. So joining North Dakota, we'll have plenty of highlights of those. For Jason Andera, I'm David Brown. Thank you so much all season long for watching Football Insiders.